What if you could reduce transfer trauma, increase move-ins, and empower residents to embrace change, all with just 2 one-hour sessions? Today's guest is pioneering a simple but powerful therapeutic approach that could transform senior living forever. You don't want to miss this one.
Welcome to From Leads to Leases, a CCR Growth podcast that helps senior living providers transform their complex challenges into opportunities. Listen in for stories from industry leaders, innovative strategies, and insights. And with our expertise, learn how to increase occupancy faster, guaranteed.
All right, welcome back to another episode of From Leads to Leases, the podcast that dives deep into the senior living and senior care industries, bringing you insights, strategies, and stories from the experts at the forefront of marketing, sales, and caregiving. I'm your host, Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth. For those of you who don't know about us, CCR Growth is a full-service marketing and growth agency that's exclusive to the senior living industry. And at our core, we help providers achieve 3 things: generate more leads without relying on expensive third-party referrals, shortening your sales cycle with automated workflows and streamlined processes, and optimizing your marketing spend to reduce cost per move-in and maximize your ROI. So through this podcast, I'm here to guide you through this process and explore the evolving and expanding landscape of the senior living industry, helping communities connect with the families and residents they serve in more meaningful and effective ways that impact your bottom line. So today we have an inspiring guest, Elanit Linder. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you're the boss.
Okay. All
Good
right.
job.
Awesome. LCSW, a licensed clinical social worker, member of the Aging Life Care Association, the author of multiple books available on Amazon, and the CEO and founder of Reframing Culture. RAMI stands for Realistic Minimalism, a small steps methodology for self-healing, introduces its flagship course, Non-Attachment Therapy, or NAT, to help people of all ages navigate life transitions and find emotional re-empowerment. Her work has been recognized nationally and internationally, and she is committed to providing tools and techniques for emotional rehabilitation and healing. So in this episode, we got a lot to cover. We're going to explore how senior living communities can jump on the bandwagon early with NAT.
I appreciate you putting it that way too. It really is jumping on the bandwagon early. We are in a pilot year. So I think the work that I'm talking about today is things that we've, evidenced slowly, as an aging life care manager through the work that I do in groups as well as one-to-one. And then this year with Dr. Rana Schatz at University of Cincinnati, we are talking to multiple places. I don't want to say too much, but both online and in person for this transitional care, which we all know. I mean, we're all in senior living. We're all talking the same language. Listen, I've run a memory care community in assisted living. I was a clinical community liaison in skilled nursing. I really understand the ins and outs of it. And now as an aging life care manager, it's, helping folks through those transitions home sometimes, right? Home to hospital, to SNF to home, or making those choice points. So I think really what brought me to create these, it's 2 one-hour sessions. It's really, really simple. What brought me to take my therapeutic knowledge and bring it to non-therapists is honestly, most of us in assisted living or in care positions are non-therapists, and I asked myself as I was coming back from my master's degree and entering the clinical world, what if we had a few of these tools? What if folks understood, a little bit of motivational interviewing, a little bit of, logotherapy for meaning and, creating choice points for older adults? It would help the folks make those transitions, right? There would be less transfer trauma, less pushing people around. My daughter put me here, or this is where I'm supposed to go. And also alleviate a lot of the stress on the caregivers, because one person can't make somebody else happy. I mean, you and I had a great chat the other week, before we did this, and we were both coming from a place of joy. And I think the main thing that we're talking about when we're talking about aging or any kind of care is it's people serving people. And both people in that equation need to be cared for and need to be coming from a place of wellness. So that's really what started this. And then I guess over the last year, I really created a curriculum. It's not brain surgery. It's not my entire master's degree. It's can you imagine? No, I mean, really, it's a small steps methodology to help people hear better and to communicate change readiness. A lot of times seniors find themselves in change without that pre-contemplation, right? There's either a medical incident or, family moved or, things that folks don't talk about so much because doctors don't have time to talk about it, right? We're talking about the entire healthcare system. We're talking about, bundles, and people are getting paid to cut, but not getting paid to talk. And there's not a lot of that, supportive care, which I'm not the only one doing this. Again, there are folks that I'm talking with this year, Michelle Kirshner at the CSPN, David Gordon, who's again creating precision supportive care for cancer care, so there are a bunch of us doing this. And by creating this NAT, or this non-attachment therapy, I've been connected with them. And, hopefully we're going to make change or give providers the tools that they need in order to just, I don't know, support people in the right way. It doesn't have to be ongoing therapy. It doesn't have to be, one-to-one for weeks on end. I always think of therapy, it's like short-term rehab, right? I always say, like, if you have a cut on your finger, you'll do everything to get that cut to feel better, because it's like on your hand, you're washing the dishes. Our hands are always wet, so it takes longer to heal the finger, right? But when it comes to emotional discomfort, we're so used to kind of pushing that aside, when if we just gave it a little attention, the feelings do pass over. And if we give it a little bit of tool, again, non-attachment therapy, really what it works with, or what these tools work with, is storytelling. Not everybody is a meditator. Not everybody is going to sit down for therapy. And especially generationally, I always look at things generationally. And, we're kind of graduating from that greatest generation. We're graduating from that silent generation into the boomers, right? And it's going to be half of our population. We all know this. We all know the statistics. We've all seen the numbers. And there's no way to kind of put away or put aside an entire generation, especially a group of folks who have created the world of work that we worked in, created interventions that we're still using, and are still working. People are working. People are sitting on boards. People are doctors. People are working. And they're not pausing to say, like, what does that last quarter of life look like? I always go to 100, right? 4 quarters. I mean, we should really go to 120. But what does that 75 to 100 look like?
Well, number one, welcome to the show.
Oh, yeah.
Should
I started with that?
You just kind of jumped into it, which is great.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
that. I love that.
No, it's okay.
No,
I think
awesome.
it's also because we talked before. I feel like I'm still in conversation with you. Yeah.
But one of the things that I love that you started with was a what if question. I think that's super important that you're thinking like that, because I think those types of questions are the ones that produce the best results. So when you're talking about Nat and you're saying the storytelling aspect of that type of therapy, I mean, is that what lends itself so much to the senior care space, do you think?
Well, I would say no. It lends itself to everything. I mean, this is a continuation of my work. I mean, anybody who knows my work in large scale performance art, I started, back in the early 2000s. I sold everything I owned for the value and the context of other people's lives. So I did that in Times Square. I did it around Christmas. I called it All I Want for Christmas Is Nothing. And I literally ended up with nothing. With a box, I had a couple pairs of overalls, like 5 t-shirts. I really wanted to experience this minimalist living, right? And you'll see that on my website as well. I really integrate both spirituality, Kabbalah, a Buddhist lens, all of those kinds of things, as well as therapeutic lenses, well-being and somatic work. The body keeps the score, right? So this is a continuation. I mean, my experience of nothingness or my experience of non-attachment, parts of it were painful. I mean, I did give up things that I loved deeply. I took photographs about them, I wrote about them, I took photographs. And I think and it's interesting too, because the greatest generation, these silent folks or whatever, I run groups and all this other stuff. And I was in group, and one of the clients was saying that a family member, they had had Thanksgiving in a different space because there had been a fire. And nobody in the group went, it was like, yeah, everybody's okay. And everybody went, yeah, they're just things. And, my grandmother said that too. And I quote my grandmother in my books. She always said, they're just things. And so this whole idea of things being just things and what's important to us, where are we in the present tense? What does that mean for us? I think that is valuable across the board. Where I see that it's incredibly valuable with I call them becoming seniors, because seniors is hard. Boomers don't want to be old. Let's not.
It's a huge transition period.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, let's not be ageist. Let's be anti-ageist, and that's 100% my lens. But we need to give folks the opportunity to look at life as a possibility. And that's also, the research behind that is this being, belonging, and becoming, which is quality of life measures out of Canada. It's not these ADLs that we're so used to, can you toilet yourself? Can you brush your teeth? That kind of thing. So who are we becoming? And I asked that of all my clients, and I've had family members be like, they like take a pause. Like the example I was going to use was I had a client, 99, almost 100, had a fall. Broke a hip fracture type thing, hospitalization, short-term rehab. And I said to the son, I said, well, is he getting up? Is he rehabbing? And he's like, actually, he is. And I was like, awesome. Make sure he gets up. I said, so is he going home, or does he need a little bit of support, in assisted living? And he was like nobody had asked him that, because the guy's 99, he's going to be 100. Everybody thinks like when you get to that, it's like old enough, or it's some kind of measurement of close to life completion. And I just don't treat it like that. So then we started talking about what his father might want for the next stage of his life. Coming out of this hip situation, does he want to go home and be independent, or would he want to be, closer to where somebody would see another fall or something? So it was a great conversation about a human who happened to be 99. So when we take the ageism out of it, and when we take like, oh, I'm 75, or oh, I'm 80, or I had somebody who probably mid to late 70s. It was a colleague. I was working with them. I was talking actually about Nat, and they were like, oh, I don't go to the aging exercises. I only go to like Pilates with the young people. And I was like, I've been to some of the senior centers. Those ladies are like, those people are, I don't know if I could keep up with them. Some of those seniors are like, they have more time to exercise than me. They're like ripped, So I was like, okay, but again, it's that we're all inundated with aging, right? We're all inundated with this ageism. We're all a little biased, right? Like I want to look young too, or do I look young enough? What does my hair look like? All those things. So anyway, I had that conversation with that person, and, they didn't want to be in the aging classes. So when we have a whole group of upcoming seniors who don't want to be old, who are never going to be old, who aren't going to be put away, who want to live intergenerationally, we have to create these choice points, and we have to integrate a therapy of non-attachment, or a lens of non-attachment. If your physical status changes, where do you see yourself going? If your mental status changes, where do you see yourself going? If nothing changes, can you take a pause and plan for what that might look like? Because when we don't empower ourselves to choice points, you and I both know this. When older adults don't make changes, the changes happen for them. And again, I can be totally anti-ageist and say that's for all of us, right? So that's really what my book is about. It's 30 steps. You don't have to do all 30 of the steps, but there's suggestions. take one of them, take three of them. But the goal is to get people to that executive director, like decision maker with themselves, not with their friend. Their friend tells them like, oh, I would never move into assisted living. My grandmother loves it. My dad's dad is 102.
Yeah.
She freaking goes to every program. She's out to lunch.
Well, I had a conversation yesterday with one of my neighbors. He's a retired doctor, and he was I live in a community that's, I would say probably 70 to 80% of the surrounding community is 65 and above. And nobody's going to be selling their home anytime soon. Like, they've all pretty much said, like, they're not going anywhere, but they all recognize that they're in a place where, like, they're not necessarily living in the ideal conditions that they should be. Like, I believe in stage, not age as well. So I'm not really basing anything on that, but basing it on somebody's mobility or somebody's cognitive health, their socialization. All of those things matter. One of the statistics that I read last year said something like, at the age of 65, we spend up to 6 hours a day alone. And by the age of 80, it's like over 10.
Wow.
And a lot of that is because, we have a significant other or partner or family members around us. And as we start to age, our circle gets smaller and smaller. So I think the socialization piece is a big part of it too. And getting people to think about that when it comes to life transitions is super important.
I agree. I just had a client too who has the money to be at home and is at home with a caregiver 24/7 and has a bit of dementia. And I was like, this person could thrive with other folks with dementia. When people are at the same cognitive level, they can have, so they take them out, they have programs. I mean, I don't know. I'm a big fan of memory care. I loved it. I would say, it was exhausting, but I enjoyed it. You just kind of join whatever conversation or whatever world people are in. But
I don't think many people realize how necessary it is, though. Like 1 in 3 adults over the age of 80 have Alzheimer's. Like, that's a crazy statistic, and it's not going away. It's not. I mean, it has reduced slightly because the longevity has increased, but that's a kind of crazy statistic that I saw, and I was just like, wow.
Yeah. And listen. Who knows what level everybody's going to get to too. The other part that I'm thinking about now as a therapist is as well, and Alka's also thinking about it. The Aging Life Care Association just addressed this in their yearly conference, is, people with mental health issues, they don't like go away. We don't all become seniors, then you've got complex mental health issues and aging, and medication management and all that kind of stuff. We metabolize medications differently as we age, and then we're on different medications, med interactions, housing, there's a lot going on. But memory care, it's important. I mean, I worked at a skilled nursing facility where they had on the second floor, it was all memory care, and they had 3 levels of programming. They had, early, mild cognitive, a little bit more confused, and then they had a room where, they had the lights and the sounds and people weren't really interacting. But I think the thing we have to remember is people are there, especially too, when we're talking about hospice, palliative, there are people there.
Yeah.
There's a soul there, we can't be talking over folks. But
I think too, because, of longevity and because people are spending more time alone, there's less self-reporting happening now where, like, we actually know the state that somebody's in or how they're living, unless we're physically there, like looking in their fridge and saying how much of this food is expired and when was the last time they took a bath or shower or washed their clothes, like all of those types of things, but it is difficult because a lot of families catch themselves in that situation.
Yeah.
There was one term that you had mentioned, and I just wanted to go back to real quick just to get some more clarity on it, was transfer trauma. I haven't heard that specific term before. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Transfer trauma is, folks are home and then they have to go to a new place, right? So it can either be a medical incident that creates that, where somebody has a change of status, they go out to the hospital and then they can't go home, right? So they've been forced into a new situation. Transfer trauma also happens, we know this from kids, right? When they're not really taking into account what the older adult is looking to do. They don't want to move to assisted living, or they don't want to move to skilled, or that kind of thing. And if they need to move, or it works for the family, the story that I always share is I had a client who was living here in Connecticut, and she had 5 kids, and they were kind of all over the state. And one kid in particular lived near a beautiful nonprofit, assisted living, this kind of thing. And they wanted her to move to California. They wanted her to move near this place. And it was back and forth over the year. She's going to move, she's not going to move. Then it's 2 years of this. And they happened to reach out to me. And I talked with the 5 kids in Zoom. And then I went and met with this woman. And what the NAT process does is it educates folks, educates therapists and non-therapists to have these conversations, which is end of life, life completion, changing this whole idea of, do not resuscitate as an intervention to allowing for life completion, allowing for the body to, die of its own accord because someone has literally passed away and then we're resuscitating them, and having these conversations. So when I went to her, I just had, a very Elanit conversation. This is how I talk to folks. It's kind but direct. And I was like, well, do you want to pass away here? Like, she was 97. I was like, you can complete your life here. Your caregiver will come in like probably the next day or a couple hours later, who knows, and then contact your family, and then your family will come to Connecticut. We kind of talked through how that would work. I was like, or do you want to be closer to this one son? You'll be in an assisted living. If somebody else is there, if something happens, they'll know sooner, and we talked through all the different scenarios, and she was like, oh, it makes more sense. She didn't like the idea of like completing her life by herself and then this caregiver who had been with her for years finding her. So then after like finding what it was that she would want, again, we're looking out. We're not looking at the details yet. It's like, what would be the best case scenario? And then kind of drilling down, and what are her fears, right? What are those blocking beliefs? And it turns out her blocking beliefs were, number one, the move. And, we had a jolly little laugh about like at 97, nobody's going to make you pack up this stuff. I've got you. I've got a move manager. Like, we've got this. And then the other thing was like making the transition, right? So for that part of it, I asked her, I said, when was a time in your life where you'd made a huge transition like this and succeeded, right? How did that feel? And she had a story, when she got married, she married somebody who was widowed. They had a bunch of kids, and she moved in not only with the husband, but also with the kids, back in the day. I mean, maybe some folks weren't shacking up, it wasn't like you tried it out. Like, so she moved in, and of course it wasn't easy. And I said, how did you handle it? And she said, I put my head down and I did it. So I use the same language, right? When we're doing motivational interviewing or when we're doing active listening, I said, so would you like to put your head down and do it now? And she said, you know what? I think I can. So anytime there was that fear, anxiety, or the indecision, right? Because with change readiness, there's the contemplation, pre-contemplation. So again, that's like that first class. That's that first kind of mini course in NAT, is like helping people understand change readiness. Again, like key elements from a therapeutic degree that I think could help everybody. If more of us had some of this therapeutic information, I think the world would be a lot kinder, because we would just pause, just pause and create space for one another. So I paused, I created space, and she decided to put her head down and do it, and she moved. And the family couldn't believe it. They're like, how'd you get her to move?
How'd you make that happen?
And I didn't get her to move. You know what I mean? I didn't get her to do something she didn't want to do. So I think that's really the mental shift that we as a community of caregivers have to look at with this upcoming boomer, community, like with this upcoming, expansive generation. Like, we're going to get everybody to do what we want them to do. We're just going to like fight half of the population. That's like impossible. Or are we all going to learn a few techniques, take a pause, and see if we can listen and support people to make choices? It's not unprecedented for corporations to make these changes. And I think that we're going to have to see it because, the statistics as well on the hospital side, right? They're being charged for readmissions. The skilled home care companies are being charged for readmissions. Like, everybody's looking to say, like, let's stop. Let's stop. We can't keep having this home to hospital to sniff to home to, and then home can be ALF, right? ALF to hospital. And we can't keep wearing out the system, wearing out the insurances, the costs of everything are going through the roof. And we're seeing folks are not happy. I mean, it was just in the news, right? That CEO was shot.
Yeah.
People are not happy with that, with the healthcare community, and there's going to be pushback. So what if we were having these choice point conversations? I think that's really what Ramey's saying. That's really what we're saying with Nat. Again, this is our first product, our first program. We have more to come. We're really saying, what if we gave people choice points? What if non-therapists were able to help people make those choice points? And then also in this, 1-2 hour sessions, we talk about life completion. What if non-therapists could help people make decisions about, a DNH? What's a DNH? Everybody's heard of a DNR. It's do not hospitalize.
Yeah.
You can choose not to make that trip. We're talking about people who just need that change readiness help. We're talking about a simple therapeutic tool to re-empower folks to make decisions in our locus of control.
Yeah. Empowerment through autonomy to some level, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's important too. I mean, you mentioned, the whole concept of helping people become change ready. So I think when you're working with non-therapists, teaching them the language of how to get somebody into that mind space has got to be the biggest part of the challenge.
Well, you can't force it. I mean,
No.
I'm also my favorite is, clients call me and again, I'm an aging life care manager and at JFS in Greater New Haven. So I've been, just the Greater New Haven area as well. But if folks need change ready mentality, it's not something I can force on them. I have clients call and then we put together we call it care navigation, a few ways to navigate the aging system, their life. And then I'm just laughing. It's hard for me to even get this out. People are like, well, I could never do that. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, all right. And then, they'll come back a little later, sometimes I'll have somebody in my system and then they'll cycle back around a couple months later. But you can't force anybody to make decisions. This is the other part. I'd love to not repeat myself, but what I do repeat myself with often is folks don't understand how the system works. They just don't. I know another aging life care manager in my area who all she's doing is consulting with financial advisors because they don't get it. I mean, I had somebody reach out to a colleague, a financial advisor. He's like, I have a client, it was another state. I said, I don't know all the rules in that state because all the, everything's state by state. He's like, is it true for a CCRC that they're going to pay in, that they're going to buy in, and then they're still going to have a monthly fee? And I'm like, yup. And then they don't get their money back until they sell the apartment. I'm like, yeah. So people don't understand what a CCRC is. They don't understand what an assisted living is. They don't understand that it changes state by state, that in New York you can spend down to Medicaid and ALF, and Connecticut you can't. It's so confusing. And I find most of what I do is education. Education about how the system is, education about navigation. Obviously, my favorite conversations as a therapist is when I help with that, when I help the change readiness, when I help the family system, engaging people in what it looks like to have, I'm not talking about therapy, but a light therapeutic conversation where talking about life completion, talking about change readiness, talking about meaning. I mean, this is logotherapy. This is Viktor Frankl. Everybody has a different idea of meaning. Everybody creates meaning in different ways. And we have to find out what it is for that individual. And there's just no way to force it. There's no way to force it. And I think that the change readiness for the boomers is going to be much, much different than this greatest generation. Those folks, they went to the tar beach, right? And somebody's like, oh, what's the tar beach? That's like in the tenement in the Bronx. It's the top of the building. It's the tar. They'd hang out on the beach, or like, not having AC, or they wouldn't have enough money for their rent during the Depression. So the whole family would like move out to the sidewalk and they'd, collect a little bit of money. And when they had a little bit of money, they'd move back in. They're just more that practice of non-attachment is there. Materialism is the last thing on their list. And then from that generation, they absolutely made sure that their kids were comfortable, right?
Yeah.
So their kids, this boom generation,
totally different.
they had everything,
Totally
man.
different. Yeah.
They had the house, they had the quiet street. They didn't have to come in till mom hollered, for the most part. And there were, communities that were doing very well. I mean, we had production in this country, right? People had jobs, things were cheaper, they had a quality of life. And I think folks don't see that if they don't have, $4 million at 75 or 80, they have to have a plan. You know what I mean? If there's not a trust, if there's not that early long-term care insurance, like long-term care insurance has changed. So again, having those conversations about navigating the system and then helping boomers to see like, okay, what would it look like if you didn't have your own house? Does that social engagement matter?
Yeah. Where is that on your scale?
So if people can, again, that's also practice of non-attachment, let go of whatever their biases are or that expectation. Where's the point in communication where people can connect? And that works with family systems. It works with clients. It's that practice of non-attachment, being present and finding where the human is.
I love that. When we were talking about the education piece and like people not really understanding, the differences in the levels of care or even the different types of communities that are out there, it's really interesting from my perspective too, from the marketing side, because the top two search terms, no matter what someone is looking for, is assisted living and nursing home. Everywhere in the US, like tenfold over every other keyword that's out there. So it's interesting that there's still the adult children mostly that are doing these searches looking for skilled nursing or memory care or assisted living or transitional assisted living, somewhere in between, but they don't know the terminology to use for that yet. It's a very broad search that they start with, and I think that's why it gets overwhelming so fast for people.
In Greater New Haven, we've been saying this for a while. I'm at a nonprofit. I'm also running RAMI. I'm like, if somebody has the funding, let's make videos. Like, let's sit down and do like a how-to. Let's throw them up all on YouTube. Let's say, this is what a CCRC is. This is what you should be doing if you have this much money. This is what you should be doing if you have no money. This is what low-income senior housing is. This is what a readmission is, what it means to go to short-term rehab, what it means to only have 100 days, what it means when your insurance drops you if you're home and you're getting PTOT at home, how to advocate for yourself. I spend a lot of time talking about that too, how to advocate with your health insurance, with the system. So what I've been saying too is I'm like, we should be talking about this stuff from 50 and 60. This is the second half of your life. Why do we plan for everything else in our life? Like everything else. People are so scared of aging. I mean, there's the U curve, right? That research with the U curve. It's supposed to be lovely, right? Hold the baby, feed the baby, change the baby's diaper. You're supposed to be happy. And then obviously, like you and I, somewhere here in the middle where we're still working, we're working, family systems, taking care of older adults, my mom's aging as well, all this kind of stuff. And then at the end, if you have enough resources, right? If we lived in a world where everybody had food, clothing, and shelter,
sure,
you're supposed to be happy again, right? This is a problem that we're putting our older adults away and not going, oh, like, what is there to learn? These folks were professors. These folks were artists. Why are we putting people away? Why are we not re-engaging with them? Why are we not planning for aging? And I think a lot of it is it's just, ageism sucks. It sucks. Why are we assuming that, people are not of value? That's also what NAT provides, is that, if we can really evidence this in an assisted living environment where it's peer-to-peer, if we can evidence this in a senior living environment where it's peer-to-peer, I mean, that could be revolutionary, right? Imagine that somebody living in an assisted living has been trained in these 1-2-hour sessions. Again, it's 2 1-hour sessions. It's not brain surgery. Most of these people have therapeutic skills from living 85, 90 years, and then they are the one educating the person as they come in, or they are the one part of the marketing team encouraging people to come in. Then they have purpose. They're not being programmed at. Because what do people do when they're being programmed at? I mean, I would have the nutcracker in yearly, right? It was these kids, they were ballerinas, they came in, we moved all the chairs. It was extraordinary. It was really good. But they just had the nutcracker. You can see that the whole place has moved around. We have to move the dining room back. And they're like, well, what's happening? And you're like, what's happening? We just had the nutcracker. There's gonna be a pause in programming. But that's nobody's fault. The fault of it is when you're programmed at, it ends. When you're engaged in something, there's engagement, right? Let's say that cognizant person is going to meet with somebody for a possible move-in. They're thinking about it. I'm meeting with Jane tomorrow. They're planning for it. Their mind is active. I mean, there's really there's a robust amount of kind of research we could do around this. We're going to start with awe and planning and becoming and these kinds of measures.
My question around that too, I guess, is that something that people want today? Because I feel like we live in a society now where everybody is thinking that fences make the best neighbors, right? They're not about community like they used to be. The older generations, it was all about who you lived near and what you all did as a community together. And now everybody's so siloed that thinking about putting everyone into a community together and trying to make that feel like a home, right? How are we doing that? Does non-attachment therapy help with guiding that mindset a little bit?
I mean, I hope so, right?
Yeah.
Because that is the tipping point, right? I mean, that is the tipping point. This whole long-term care, assisted living, CCRC, this worked for the over 80 folks. And now it's not so much over 80 because those folks are also becoming boomers, right? We're really on the cusp here right now. So it worked. And I think everybody's kind of questioning, is this going to continue to work, right? Do we need to build something more intergenerational? Does this work? I don't know. I think we are not going to have as many move-ins unless we create a system of autonomy. People are still going to be independent in their apartments. Some of them are larger, some of them are completely independent living where, they have their own kitchen, they have their own bathroom, they have 2-bedroom and a living room and all this stuff. I'm not saying they would have to be in the community the whole time. I'm saying that they would have autonomy. Let's look at what that autonomy would do to, I'm not going to call it anxiety, depression. I'm going to call it depression, anxiety, when we're talking about assisted living, right? Because when we don't have hope or this awe that we're looking to measure, when we don't have becoming, like being, belonging, and becoming, being, who am I now? Who do I belong to? And who am I becoming? When we don't have a striving or an awe, then there is a bit of complacency. What are you doing?
You're just existing at that point.
Yeah. Which, it is great if you're at the top of a mountain. I don't think everybody's like that. There has to be some kind of becoming. And I think that's also a transition. I didn't bring the research with me, but there are a few universities that are creating almost like graduation program. And what it is it's folks who are completing their work life, right? Like retiring. And this is something that I talk about too with the elders is I'm like, okay, you've retired. Your value and your existence is not your job, right? Like you and I do this because we love the work. I mean, but I'm not somebody, if I didn't have to work, I would not be bored. A lot of this generation, we're going to see that they're tied into this value of who are you? What did you do? What did you produce? What impact did you have on the world? How do we create meaning? And so I'm not saying it has to be in community all the time. I'm saying awe, seeking, and then that autonomy of choice. And let's say somebody does have a medical incident where they do need to make a change. They do need to move into long-term care. What part of their language can we find that helps them feel that they've made a choice? We always talk about a move-in, right? Can you bring that, like, their favorite chair? Does it fit in the room? But like, are you putting the chair in the far corner, or are you putting it where they want it? Are you bringing their TV? Are you, what are the things that they want? How can we create some choice points for the person, so that they have some say in their own lives? There are always ways to do it. Autonomy and choice matters. It really matters. When we take the person, that individual, and we say to that person, both spiritually and physically, what are your choice points? Then it doesn't have to be a huge choice. It doesn't have to be whether you move in or whether you don't. Again, for that one woman I talk about who moved across the country, it wasn't whether she moved or not. It was replacing that negative cognition for a positive one, helping her to see how she would make that move. For her, that move was putting her head down and doing it. For somebody else, it might be, like closing their eyes and then waking up in the place the next day. Some people like to do that. Do everything for me. I'm not going to look,
Yeah, I just want to see it done.
Yeah. Don't tell me I'm going to go, to Mexico for a week or whatever.
Yeah. I'm in space. I'm going to be 46 this year, so I've got a while, and I'm planning for retirement right now.
Good for you.
I definitely don't feel I'm in a space where I'm going to be putting my foot down and fighting, making a life choice of simplifying and moving into some type of a lifestyle community. But see, I'm seeing it different. I'm not looking at it as a retirement home. I'm looking at it as a lifestyle choice. It doesn't mean I have to retire. How many seniors today are working encore careers or doing things that they didn't have time to do before, and now all of a sudden they're getting to do it because they do have all this available time, and maybe they don't have the huge house payment they had before, so they've been able to simplify their life a little bit. So I think, reframing and reshaping that so they start to see the positives in those types of situations is super important.
I agree with you. There's another community here too in my area in Greater New Haven that it's not even independent living. It's housing, and food, clothing, shelter, all of it combined. It's really not that expensive. They're already, kind of entering into that stage and phase, what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious to see. I think the longevity in the industry now too, with just life expectancy going up as much as it has. People were planning for 20 years of retirement. Now it's like 30 years or 30 plus years. That changes things for people and what their options are and how soon they need to make choices and things like that. So I get the hesitancy that a lot of people have to like get out of the situation they're in. But I think the work that you're doing is so vital in that space. For communities looking to implement that, what are the first steps that they should take, and how can they assess whether their residents and staff are ready for this kind of emotional and therapeutic work?
I would say, first of all, they can just reach out to me. It doesn't have to be the whole program. They don't have to be a part of the pilot. I can come in and do, a 1 or 2 hour talk about motivational interviewing, meaning, and logotherapy. I can drill down on some of these things so that they can have a few of the skills to move forward. These are, simple interventions. If there is a community that has, a few locations, we would be interested in partnering with, their marketing team in order to train the folks, right? Train the trainer. So the reading material, it's really about an hour. It's not an enormous amount of material. We could do it in a few sessions. And then, oversight. Obviously, there would be oversight, therapeutic oversight, with move-ins and again, internally, if somebody's struggling. I think we all see those struggles. Like it's that person who says, my kids put me here, or it's that person who doesn't feel like they belong, or it's that person that, you're seeing the depression, right? I had a conversation and they were talking about, going into facilities and doing one-to-one therapy, and that it was mostly depression. And I was like, well, how are you helping them? You're just listening once a week? And he's like, yeah, that's pretty much what it is. It's like, you're not really going to help them anyway. They're in these facilities. I was just like, I literally, so again, that's where I think it's not therapy. How is therapy helping those folks? Talking about how sad they are and then talking about it again, literally re-traumatizing and re-triggering the issue. It's like, there's a boo-boo and then you're just, scratching at it.
Yeah.
And so that's where sometimes, again, I'm a different kind of therapist. That's when I'm like, okay, what's bothering them? Is it somatic? Do they need to move more? Do they need to get out of their chair? Is it meaning? Do they need to, find an activity? How can we think outside of the box to create meaning, hope, new learning for people? In one of my groups, somebody was having trouble sleeping. Again, what's positive about group is like, if other folks are having trouble sleeping, which is something that happens as we age, right? They can give suggestions to one another. And the suggestions are like fire, oh, now everything's on YouTube. I have a guy who talks to me while I sleep, like everybody has all this stuff. And one of the women over 100, she says, oh, well, Elanit taught us EFT, the emotional freedom technique, the tapping. She's like, I tap, tap, tap. You do a few cycles of it and I go straight to sleep. And you're like, here's somebody who's learning new things. She is living in long-term care, evolving and doing something new. So just because we're housed in a different way than we grew up, I think what I'm asking or what I'm saying needs to happen. Programming needs to change. We can't program at people anymore. They need to be engaged and we need to have some of these therapeutic type tools. It's not therapy. I'm not talking about one-to-one. These are people. We're people serving people. And it has to be an individualized solution. I'll give you one where there was major behaviors. This was at Skilled. This was during the pandemic, right? You had to have, when you came in from the hospital, there was a 2-week isolation, right? So it wasn't like you could send folks with memory care issues up to the second floor. They had to be there for 2 weeks. So some people were there for a hip and like reading the New York Times and like FaceTiming with their kids while they rehabbed, and some other folks had issues. This woman was in and out of other people's rooms, having a lot of behaviors, wouldn't get dressed, was extremely angry. And I called the kiddos and I talked to her and she said, listen, mom was in a very Black neighborhood. She went to the Black church. She went to the Black grocery store. Her son had passed away. So she would visit his grave, twice a week. She had a system and she never went out of her neighborhood. And she's like, all of a sudden, now she's with all these other people. She has dementia. She was pretty progressed in her dementia. And, this is trauma informed. We changed the caregivers. A lot of the caregivers on that side, listen, I'm white. Some of the other caregivers were Latinx, white adjacent, and we changed the caregivers. I asked if other folks were willing to like swap out and give her, and all of a sudden she started recognizing people. She started recognizing her community and her behaviors went down. So like what changes can we make? And that last scenario, it's uncomfortable for us, right? Can we talk about systemic racism in healthcare? Can we talk about not only how the clients feel, but how the caregivers feel? And if we're not having those conversations with aging, we're missing. We're totally missing. Because especially this older generation, they grew up, whether they were the perpetrators of it or the recipients of it, they grew up with systemic racism in this country.
Yep.
So I think really having those conversations, recognizing our own biases, letting go of what we imagine the scenario is going to be, what we imagine the outcome is going to be. And I always use the term curiosity. Like, how curious can we be? Like, let's be curious.
That's a great question. I mean, because non-attachment therapy is so unique to each individual, I mean, how does a community or sales team or director, whoever's working with prospects, I mean, how do they go about selling it?
My marketing pitch would be, are your parents fighting with you? Are they not ready to receive care or to listen or to make any kind of changes? Our caregivers are trained in non-attachment therapy, non-attachment tools. This modality will alleviate the emotional stress on you, help your parents make the right decision for themselves, and eliminate the emotional stress on our caregivers. So we're kind of taking out that transfer trauma, making your relationship with your parent better, maintaining that relationship so they don't hate you later, so they're not like, my kids put me in here. And we're helping them make a choice. And even if they don't make the choice to, I don't know, Elanit's assisted living, they're more change ready than they were before. If they offer this for, let's say 10 prospects and they get 3 more move-ins than they had before, that's a win for them. It's only 2 hours.
It's not an unreasonable amount of time.
It's really not. Yeah.
I actually did a survey last year. I surveyed around 30,000 sales professionals in senior living, and I asked them how much time do they typically spend with a qualified prospect, and over 75% of them said 15 plus hours.
Wow. Yeah.
So if 2 of those hours were spent doing what it is that you're bringing to the table, just imagine the outcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the core competency of NAT is this object therapy, which is what I talked about from back in the day, giving away everything. If an older adult can look at one object that had either emotional or historical value to them, write about that object, do a little emotional research, and either give it to a family member that's interested in the object or give it away, then they've created that change. They've created and kind of forced themselves into that change readiness. By not being attached to things, we have more freedom. We just have emotional and physical freedom. So it's really like, even talking through it, the memory of an object you own or the memory of an object you no longer own, the value of an object you own. It takes people through this step by step. And there's a script. The caregiver or the non-therapist doesn't have to come up with their own language. There's a script. They can stay on script while they do it a few times. If at one point they get so comfortable with it down the road, a couple of years, they can obviously add their own flourishes and stuff like that. But it walks you through it. It walks you through how to help people have a practice of non-attachment, be present, find their own meaning, and make positive changes that work well with their inner locus of control, their person, who they are, not somebody else. The reason that I'm so transparent about it is it's like, these are things that everybody can learn from. And the same thing too, therapists don't do it all the time, but self-disclosure helps. We're all learning from one another.
With the work that we do as well. I mean, being in these spaces and just connecting with people on a human to human level, I think that's so important.
People serving people.
Yeah. I mean, if you had to give one piece of advice to senior living providers who want to integrate wellness programs, because we know that they're so focused on the physical and the activities, they're not really looking at the wellness side of things as much as they should. I mean, what would be your advice to help them improve their offerings?
Oh my gosh. Have the residents run the programs.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Because in skilled or anything clinical, when we're doing an intake, it's all past tense thinking. What did you like to do? What did you do in your prior life? What are the things that are that you were involved in? If somebody's a meditator, yes, you can have somebody who leads the class, but have a facilitator. I think the buildings that are the most successful are the ones that were, my crews, right? Multiple programs an hour. They were not all run by me. They were run by other people. They were run by residents. They were run by students. Have other things going on. Have people involved in their community. So how can we find meaning? How can we get out of our own way? How can we do something new? And that's at every stage of our lives. I also get complacent. I know, right? Working full time. I created an intervention and I'm parenting. I do.
Doesn't
believe
sound
me.
Like it.
I completed a master's degree while working in a skilled nursing facility during a pandemic and parenting. I do get complacent. We hop in those neural pathways. We hop in that passive meditation space. So I call it joyously disruptive, and some of these things are in my book. that's really what the bucket and the stone is about. It's not like do all 30 stitches. It's not like do all 30 interventions. It's like, have you gotten in a rut? Are you doing the same thing? How can you kind of shake yourself out of that? Oh, I'll look for a tool, getting them going and figuring out how you can be more present, be more, and it's not even to be active or successful or anything like that, but it's to engage that joy, that quality of life. Most of us have trauma. You know what I mean? A lot of folks have complex PTSD from growing up in abusive households. So many people, we're talking about intergenerational trauma. We're talking about epigenetics. We're talking about, we have a huge refugee population here now. Everybody's traumatized. Okay, so how do you get happy? What do you do? What do you do? But I think what we're seeing too is that people can take all of this action. You can take action to be happy and not be healed. So how do you get healed if you're not a meditator? How do you get healed if you're not a yogi? Is it storytelling through object therapy? Is it speaking to somebody else without it being therapy, one-to-one? How do you joyously disrupt that inner neural pathway? Because that's what it is. We're set in certain ways. Everything works. You just have to find out what works for you. Whatever it takes to shake yourself up, to get yourself back on track to who and what you want to be.
We do need disruptors, I think, from time to time. And I think kind of going back to what you're saying about complacency too, I think it's the intentionality that we put behind the things that we're doing. Like my son, for example, we write out his schedule every day. He's got his routine, a morning routine, an evening routine. He's got things he does at certain points throughout the day. But it's like, if we stop and ask, why are we doing this? And why are we doing it in this order? And what's the goal of doing it this way? Or what's the goal of having the schedule at all? Like when we start asking those deeper questions, it starts to bring out those more meaningful moments where he can start to process, oh yeah, no, I'm doing this because I want to be better at time management, or I want to be more self-reliant. Like there's bigger lessons at play that we're getting at. And even with my routine, right? Like if it's exercise or if it's doing my gratitude journal, like I find myself falling into those spaces where I'm just doing it because that's what's blocked out for that period of time. But then I have to stop and think about like, okay, no, really, why are you doing it? Like, what are you getting out of it? What is the outcome that you want? And once you can figure that out, I think it kind of changes. The complacency goes away, and then it just becomes like a space of self-improvement.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. It's having a toolkit. I mean, that's really what I'm talking about, is having a toolkit and picking and choosing and doing something different.
Let's talk about some things you have upcoming. I know you've got the pilot program for non-attachment therapy. Can you share more details about what's in the pipeline and how our audience can get involved?
Again, we're really looking for a partner for a long-term care facility or an assisted living facility to co-pilot and in person. Definitely, I'm willing to come out to places, whether it's telehealth, doing a Zoom, or being in person, when people are doing program development, everybody takes days off to do community development. Happy to do that. Get the book, I guess, right? You can do the work at home. I do see people one-to-one via telehealth, if folks want to reach out. I don't love to see people ongoing. I like to re-empower folks and get them going, like a short-term rehab. How else can they get involved? I would say get involved in the pilot. We're really, if you are involved in a healthcare system, I think what I'm finding is, this from running a podcast, is that it takes a village. It's going to take more than you see. It's going to take more than, Dr. Schatz and myself. It's going to take more than the involvement of like Michelle Kirshner and, the CSPN and piloting it for cancer. Like it's going to take more than all that. It's going to take a place and a space and, it's taking funding, So if we really care about, this precision supportive care is what it's called in the healthcare community. If we care about making these programs happen and creating change, like putting in that month or two up front in order to have systemic change and joyous, continued happiness ongoing, where both the caregiver and the client feel supported and loved, and where people are well enough to really interact with one another, if folks are willing to make that kind of change, it takes a village. I mean, and I know that, assisted living is a place where there is that kind of money. Some of these folks are making $800 million ROI at the end of the day. And I know the caregivers aren't making a lot of money. So like, if we're going to keep this system in place, how are we going to support the caregivers? How are we going to alleviate some of that caregiver stress by re-empowering the clients? Okay, if we're not, because again, like, yes, I think caregivers should be paid more, but it's a Band-Aid, right? Because then we're still programming the people are still feeling transfer trauma. They're still being forced in, and then the programs are coming to them. They're receiving care. They're not engaged in their care. There's no meeting of the minds. So if we're going to jiggle up this system a little bit, I mean, we're really looking for a partner that's going to help us, like, let's launch it. Let's make systemic change. And then once this is out there, I do have more programs. I took the program development track at Columbia for a very specific reason. I did, do the program development side. We did, statistical analysis and program development and, pre and post surveys. That's really where I would say the heart of my passion lies, and like, helping people to help themselves and to make long-lasting change. So, if there's anybody out there who's looking to really shake it up and be different, it's going to have to happen. There's always a disruptor, and I think that's what NAT is. That's what non-attachment therapy is. It's disruptive, and I have had people say no. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I think, no risk, no reward type situation, but I don't necessarily think it's a negative risk. I think it's just a different perspective that they would be bringing to the table. But I think it would only benefit the residents in the long term, getting them on board with thinking about change, seeing conversion rates increase. I bet, if you got this involved with the sales team.
Appreciate you, Jerry. I mean, from the beginning. There are people who believe it. It's that, we're out there, people are saying, yes, let's do it. And it's going to take a push. I'm at that tipping point.
Cool. Yeah. And I mean, if we want to put links to all the research and any case studies and anything like that too, like the more we can throw into the episode, the better. So
yeah,
we'll go ahead and do that. Okay. Well, thank you, Elanit, for everything, all your time today and all this great information. I really appreciate all the insights you have. And I think we could probably talk for like another 2 hours.
I know.
It wouldn't seem like more than 15 minutes. So
I know. Absolutely.
But as we wrap up today's episode, I do want to thank you for joining us and sharing your insights in the transformative power of non-attachment therapy and senior living. This approach, your approach, is making a meaningful impact on the lives of older adults and their families. So if you want to stay connected with Elanit and learn more about her work, you can visit her website, rameyculture.com.
Just email me at rameyculture@gmail.com.
Okay. All right. We'll put both of those in the show notes. And then any social media accounts, I'll make sure that you want a link. I'll put those.
My LinkedIn is pretty good. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm so bad about it. Like every time I see somebody go to my Ramey Culture at Facebook, I'm like, oh man, like, like I definitely need a team of folks. My LinkedIn is pretty good. I'm good about keeping that up to date. Yeah.
Right,
my
that's
LinkedIn
good
is
to know.
Yeah. Find me on LinkedIn for sure.
Okay. I'll make sure I link that.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, as always, we hope you found this episode insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to explore the dynamic world of senior living, marketing, sales, and caregiving. Also, remember that From Leads to Leases isn't just an audio experience. We're also a video podcast. So if you want to see the video versions of our podcast, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube or Spotify channels. I'm Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth, thanking you for joining us on From Leads to Leases, where we're giving you all of these great senior living industry insights for free and asking nothing in return other than for you to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might find it useful. I'm truly grateful for your time and attention. Until next time, lead with strategy and with heart. Chat with you again soon. Thanks, Elanit.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to From Leads to Leases. Are you ready to fill your rooms faster and increase occupancy? Visit ccrgrowth.com to learn about our Senior Growth Innovation Suite, a proven system to generate highly qualified, tour-ready leads, accelerate sales, and reduce acquisition costs. Let's connect and turn your challenges into opportunities. See you next time.